Welcome you all tonight to our Thrive Wednesday Bible study. And while I'm on vacation, I wanted to use the opportunity to introduce you to a friend of mine, Alec Fisher, and how he has gotten involved in podcasting. And I did a couple podcasts with him. And so tonight you will see one of those. And look forward as well to the fact that I will be doing some podcasting this fall, hopefully one on campus once a week at FGCU, and also at least once a week right at Thrive. It may be through Zoom that I might Zoom some of you in as we discuss different matters of culture, life, faith, or it may be in person, but I look forward to it all. So I hope you enjoy the podcast tonight. Alec is a very brilliant pastor. He was a student at University of Florida when I knew him and part of our campus ministry, and he ended up going into the pastoral ministry. And I'm excited for his ministry in North Carolina and our time together. Blessings tonight. Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, Pastor Alec here, and today I am joined by John Roth, who is the pastor of Thrive.
Thrive Community Church.
Thrive Community Church in Naples, Florida.
Estero. Come on.
Oh, Estero. My bad.
Estero, which means
I
think it's Spanish for like swamp or gutter or something.
Sure. Okay. Well, as a native Floridian,
right. We're in between Naples and Fort Myers.
Okay. Yeah. See, to me, it's just all Naples and the Everglades, and that's it.
I know. I get it.
Now, John and I, we met in Gainesville at John's previous call at First Lutheran Church in Gainesville, as I was a student at the University of Florida. Before that, John, you've made your way across the United States as a pastor.
Quite a bit, yeah. I grew up in Michigan, and then after undergraduate work, where I thought I was going to be a high school teacher for a while in biology and art. I know, kind of.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. Until I took education courses, and then I said, no way in God's green earth do I want to deal with this. Because it was just so much classroom management issues. And now look, I'm teaching on a college level adjunct, but still, and actually I'm really enjoying that. I really do. So it's kind of full circle. But then I went and I decided to move into the pastoral ministry and my junior year in college. And so I picked up the languages at that point in time, Greek and Hebrew, and then went to St. Louis Seminary, the same one you did, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and graduated before you were born.
What year was that?
1987.
It was the year before I was born. I was born in 88.
And so I've been in the pastoral ministry longer than you have been alive.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So what was really shocking at the time, they just placed you. And I mean, when they just placed you from the seminary, you really didn't have much say at all. They didn't really consider what you wanted too much. And so at the time, Dean Hopman, who was doing the placement, looked at me and said, well, looks like you could use a challenge.
Oh, that's always great to hear before.
It's like, what am I supposed to say to that? So my first call was to be a campus pastor and church developer at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know what I was doing. And so I got there and the Southern District said, John, don't come right away. We're not ready for you.
What does that mean?
It meant that there was a group of people that were at the chapel at the time in the spring that had decided and left the synod with their pastor to start another church because they were afraid he was retiring and going to be a full-time psychologist, counselor, and they were afraid what they would get. And from the seminary. And so they left and abandoned the place, and the building was hadn't been maintained well. because the district at that time owned it, the Southern District. And so they said, don't come right away because we're not ready, because the place was, the roof was leaking. Everything was a mess. And so I finally get there, and there's no name, there's no phone number, there's no hymnals, there's no Bibles, there's pews, and they did tile the floor again because of all the water damage, and they got a new roof on it. And they had just mowed the lawn that was like 1.5 feet high. And I find out the place is kind of on the wrong side of the campus because it was built in 1960. It looked like the altar in front was this giant 6 foot across white metal. It looked like a flying saucer dome with a hole in the middle of it. And underneath it was this aqua kind of with holes in it thing. And then out of the center of it came what looked to me at first as an antenna. It was supposed to be a cross with fish bones off of it. This was one of the most ugly. Well, we got all that changed over the years because I just thought no student would want to walk in and look at this. And especially from an art major point of view, it was like,
yeah, no kidding.
This was not good. So, but anyways, so I started Chapel of the Cross there, campus ministry to LSU. There 5.5 years. Then I took a call as an associate pastor in Huntsville, Alabama. I was only there 2 years, but I did meet my wife, Lisa. Okay. She was at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And then I took a call out to Visalia, California, Grace Lutheran Church and School. And we were there 7 years in the Central Valley near Sequoia National Park. And then, pardon?
I said, wow, I didn't know you were, I knew you were in California. I didn't know where.
Yeah. Well, it was a farmland 30 miles from the entrance to Sequoia.
Okay.
So near the foothills, but like they grew everything, citrus, almonds, walnuts, peaches, plums, nectarines, kiwi, and a lot of dairies. And so we called it Visalia Perfume, the smell in the area.
That sounds like a place you wouldn't want to leave.
Well, there were some good things about it, but it was a tough ministry. There's some good people there, and we loved it. Then I received the call to First Lutheran in Gainesville. And so it was kind of cool because I got back into the university setting, and I was there 10 years. And then the district wanted a new ministry start and a campus ministry at Florida Gulf Coast University. And actually, I just really didn't think that would, I didn't see this all fitting together. I had just finished my doctorate in May 2012 from Asbury Theological Seminary. And my doctorate was on Luther's theology of the cross as a paradigm for leadership development and church revitalization.
And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today.
And then I got the call, came down here, and I've been here since 2013. And the university's been extremely open. To me, I've never seen this. So the dean of students asked me to teach a leadership class because I had experience in that area. And from there, the university has asked me to teach for the Honors College a couple leadership courses, and then I proposed. And then they said, "Quick, we need somebody to teach contemporary world religions, the philosophy and communication department." And so I started teaching that, which was kind of fun, and it was a lot of work to learn. And then I proposed teaching the New Testament to the Honors College. And that became a class that was both honors embedded. So there were some honor students, but it was a general class. That was a lot of fun.
Sure.
And then I have now, I'm going to be teaching that again this fall, as well as contemporary world religions. And I'm working on a class right now, creating a syllabus and the plan for, let's just touch both sides and the third rail, religion and politics in America.
That is.
And my critique of how the interaction between religion and politics in America is through a theology of the cross perspective, that we've never done it properly. And it's fascinating. So I'm working on that. That'll be taught in January of 2022. Okay. So I've got some time yet. Okay. So this will help me, Alec, talking with you about some of these issues if we go in that direction. And we can just talk theology of the cross, because there's a lot in that. And so we might be bouncing ideas back and forth on this.
Well, and if we need to pick up another time too, we can do that, because
that'd be great.
As our conversations go, they could go for a long time into all different directions. So we'll have to do this again soon. I could say that.
I love talking with
already,
you.
Right?
So you met me at First Lutheran. Tell me about that a little more, because I remember you very, this young, handsome, brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you.
Guy.
No,
who I think was trying to figure out theologically where he fit.
Well, yes. Yeah. See, that was actually, that was going on at the time, because.
And I think you got involved in RUF. Is that right?
I wasn't involved
you attended.
in RUF. I attended regularly. Well, with Josh.
Not bad. With
Josh Armstrong. And he's been talking about seminary stuff. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, cool.
But anyway, so we see what had happened with me was I grew up in a Lutheran church, went to a parochial Lutheran school, with my church where Dan is at now.
Tampa.
That's right. Tampa. And I was, after confirmation, I got involved with a Baptist youth group. That's where all my friends went. And they kind of really pushed me to read the Bible and to explore theology. And I was always like the resident Lutheran, so they would always, I was, Lutheran, I was sacramental. I had, when I was 17, I read The Bondage of the Will. And so I was very, because we're talking about free will and all this other stuff.
No, so that is such a fascinating book. And
it is. That's another topic, right? So, but
that could be fun.
It was one of my youth, and I'm very close to the youth leaders that I had during that time, even today. Okay, very influential for me. But it was when I really started getting interested in theology when they had the Dead Sea Scrolls. There was an exhibit in St. Pete, and one of my youth leaders took me over there to see the Dead Sea Scrolls and listen to a lecture.
This was in high school yet?
I was 16 or 17 when that happened. And it just blew my mind. Right. So, but after that, when I went to UF, I was looking for churches, and I wasn't, I was kind of in and out of the LCMS kind of in high school. And so I was looking around. I visited probably 50 churches the first year. And I mean,
how do you do that?
Going to multiple churches on a Sunday.
On the same Sunday. Yeah,
that's right. And finally, I had one of my Baptist youth leaders, Greg, said, "Alec, why don't you just go back to an LCMS church?" I was looking around. I was going to all kinds of different places. Calvary Chapel's big in Gainesville, and all kind. I had friends that were kind of Assemblies of God, and so I was never kind of Assemblies of God kind of I was never in that mindset. But I visited their church once, and with them, and so he said, well, let's find the closest LCMS church to campus. And that was First Lutheran Church at Gainesville. And so I went for probably 5 Sundays, the end of my first year of college. And you didn't have an associate pastor at the time. You had a vicar.
Right. And
it was like, right when I felt like I was at home. It felt like I was home. And I forgot you had preached a sermon. It was an Easter sermon, and it was about the disciples and Jesus. It must have been like an ascension kind of thing, because it was about him saying, "I'm going to leave," and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, I'm at home now, and so when I came back after summer break, I spent the summer in Israel, came back, and you were still there. And now, Associate Pastor Dan and Vicar Luke, and it was and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I remember the time where you and Dan sat down at the lunch table after, because you had college lunch after service.
Right.
And I think it was during one of these, and you both kind of looked at me and said, "So, Alec, this is not my first year there. This might have been we had gotten to know each other by then." They said, "So when are you going to go to seminary?" Or I said, "I'm not doing that." And then eventually I decided to, and I did, and I'm very thankful. Yeah, so we've known each other now for over a decade.
Wow. Yeah, isn't it amazing?
That is. Yeah, that really is. It doesn't seem like that, but it is.
And now and here we are.
Yeah. So, So I remember when you were writing your thesis.
Ah, yes.
I was a student at the time. Oh, okay. So maybe it's not as exceptional as I thought it was. How long did it take you to write your thesis?
Well, working full time and doing a doctorate. Well,
Yeah, I'm doing that right now.
You know too well.
I know.
I was writing. So I started in 2005 with classes. And I think, so I got done with my classwork, I think by 2008.
Okay. Because I started
2009, somewhere in there. And then it was like, I was ready to give up. And my wife looked at me and said, "No, you won't." So it was I did a qualitative analysis of churches, people who were coaching them, kind of an intervention team that came in to try to revitalize these Lutheran churches.
Okay.
And a couple of their members. And the problem was it took about 2 to 3 weeks of doing the research, of going and visiting and spending time with them. But then it was like, after all the interviews, I think I had 450 pages of single space 12-point font transcripts.
Wow.
But the problem was not that, it was taking the recording and typing them out.
Inscribing
at the time, the language dictation to type software was not that good.
I did that for my Jewish ethnography classes at UF. I had to do interviews and transcriptions.
Yeah.
And one long interview, I don't even know how long that took. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
400.
These were the pastoral interviews were over an hour each.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the shortest interviews, there were 26 interviews.
Okay.
And the shortest interviews were 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And so it was just like, oh my goodness. Once that got done, then I used a computer aided, actually an internet cloud-based aided a program for analysis, for qualitative analysis. That went pretty quickly.
Okay.
But it was up to that point. The literature review was fun. I had gotten most of that done prior in some of the classes. But anyways, in the end, that's what I did.
Wow. Okay. What'd you glean from that?
Well, okay. Now you're asking me to go back about 9 years.
Yeah, that's right.
I gleaned the fact that the theology of the cross is, we talk about it, but nobody really embraces. It's hard to embrace.
Okay.
And most people don't want to live it out. And I loved what Gerhard Forde said. It's not really a theology of the cross. It's the theologian of the cross.
Right.
The idea is it's not an abstract, here are some principles and now you've got it. It is a lived experience. And Luther would talk about the fact that a true theologian is one who basically goes through, hell.
Yeah.
I know that sounds bad, but we get crucified daily. I mean, Paul talks about this all over the place, that, always caring about in ourselves the death of Jesus, that the life of Jesus might be manifest. That's part of the theology of the cross. The theology of the cross is that evaluating situations, you can't just look and go, oh yeah, of course, that's great. That God does work under his opposite often. He hides himself. We never see him directly.
Right.
We never hear him directly. We hear him through the word, but it's the word through people, right? Sure. Prophets, apostles. Yep. We don't get like a vision of God's glory in its full. We'd be dead.
Right.
So one of Luther's big texts that helped him understand this, because he was really trying to figure out how in the world does all this fit together? Because our experience on a daily basis is not necessarily that I don't hear God's voice speaking to me. That might like people, oh my goodness, you mean past? No, I read it.
Yeah.
I pray. I believe he is speaking through his word, he's working, but he's underneath or within very ordinary things.
When you might even say that he speaks, we want him to speak to us, when really in many, what we see in the, what you really see is him speaking through us. Right.
Through us and through others.
Right.
Right. It's called community.
Right. That's
Christian community. So people are always looking for God in all the wrong places.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back and flesh out then. What does it mean to be a theologian of the cross? Because I brought that up, talk about like RUF, we were talking a little bit about our RUF before. And that's Reformed University Fellowship, which is, I had friends that were in RUF.
Right. I've got a good, we get along very well with RUF here at Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah,
as well.
Great. Real nice. They're Calvinist, but they're
not always like strict Calvinists.
No.
I don't know if anybody can be without becoming a fatalist. So.
Well, that's a whole nother topic. but do you remember that? What was it? There was the center right down the street from First Lutheran in Gainesville. There was the
right. It was the Christian Study Center.
Yes.
And they were PCA.
They were PCA, and they hosted a lot of really neat speaking events.
They did. And so I think one of the big differences. So a theology of the cross is that God is hidden under. In his word, in the flesh of Jesus Christ, in things that you don't see directly. In the cross is God's greatest act. The cross is God's greatest event that he's ever done. And yet it looks like if you just looked at the cross, you looked at Jesus on the cross, you wouldn't see God's beauty there. You wouldn't see God's glory. No, you want to go to the sunset. You want to go to the beach. You want to go to the mountains. We want to always go somewhere else. And God says, here I am, hanging on this piece of wood, beaten, bloody, dying, weak, actually dead, right? And yet God does his greatest work. So this is why Paul, Paul talks about the word of the cross, not the word about the cross.
Yes.
In 1 Corinthians. And there was a good book on that. I would like to remember Reagan Prenter, maybe, I think wrote it, called The Theology of the Cross. It's a little thin paperback.
Oh, I've only done
a facet series. Stuff. I think I've got a copy of it. You would like it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find.
Well, I think right now I'm doing a series on 2 Corinthians. And
my goodness. To me, that's theology of the cross everywhere, because it's the super apostles who look so great. It's basically today, if you want, in our modern day, where I see a theology of the glory, that's what Luther compares the theology of the cross to, right? Theology of the glory is the prosperity gospel, which is no gospel at all, but the prosperity gospel of, if you do these things, then God will bless you with,
I think there's even more to it than I think there's another gospel that's making its way around, the gospel of anonymity. Think about it. We live in an increasingly shame culture. And so the anonymous is actually freeing. And
so that's kind of antinomian in the sense, trying to get away from the law altogether.
Well, just being anonymous.
Right. I free myself.
By not being known and then becoming whatever I'd like to be.
Right. And I get to define myself, whatever I'm feeling for that day.
Right. And so
no, that's a false gospel too. I think they're tied together. So the theology of the glory and basically they're all based on power. I think that one of my so the theology of the cross is seeing the God we worship, the God who is a God of love and compassion. So when going back to, I think, one of Luther's great Revelation passages that he found was in Exodus 33, where Moses is so frustrated with the children of Israel breaking, the 10 Commandments while he was getting them, comes down the golden calf, all that stuff. And then afterwards, he basically says, I'm done. I'm going to give up. God also kind of wants to give up. And then Moses says, show me your glory. Mm-hmm. And God says, you can't handle my glory.
That's right. The what is it? The divine holy moon, right? You can see my backside.
Yeah, exactly. So he says, I'll put you in the cleft of a rock and I'll pass by you. And when I pass by you, you get to see my backside.
Yeah, that's right. Rock of Ages cleft for me, right?
But the passage, and I've got it written here, I think, in Exodus 33. Yes, here it is. Then and my glory will pass by, and then I will take away my hand and you'll see my back. And then it says, and I think it's in 34, the Lord passed before him and proclaimed. And this is really important. This becomes kind of like this is kind of the center of that. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness.
Yeah.
Okay? It goes on from there. But those words become who God is at his center. So you look at the cross of Jesus. Do you see a God of power? No. You see God stripped of every attribute, everything that could possibly, even life itself. And yet the one thing that at the center of God is still there is love.
Well, and I think that's the power of the cross, is that not only does it reveals who God is, two major things, who God really is.
Yes.
And who we really are. Because
we're the ones that kill him.
And that's what I think is so about the theology of being a theologian of the cross, is looking at that and being willing to be honest with yourself about what the world really is and what God,
how broken the world is, and how broken it was to reject the Son of God as he came to love and forgive and reconcile.
And that really is we talk about 2 Corinthians. That's a theme throughout Paul's whole ministry. Is
all the time. Saying, well, I think his whole Damascus Road experience is theology of the cross. Par excellence.
Cut him down.
He cut him down, but he didn't kill him. I think Paul would have sat after. So, is it Acts 9? Right? He's traveling to kill, or to
got his letters.
Damascus Christians, right? Followers of the way, and Jesus meets him and blinds him, but he's looking. He goes, "Who are you?" And he says, "I am Jesus. Who are you persecuting?" And I think after that, he's blinded, and he's got 3 days before Ananias comes to heal him.
He's got to go to his house. Or no, so he's got to go to Ananias comes to the house that he's staying at. Yeah.
Right. He is totally helpless. He is totally weak. He can't do anything. And I think he's thinking the whole time, why didn't he just kill me?
Yes.
He should have killed me. I don't deserve to live. And that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. So he realized his own depravity, his own rebellion, and God so gracious to forgive him and spare his life.
And at the same time, he's also told that he's also told that he's gonna suffer.
Oh, and he does.
Jesus. And that's his entire life, is that
suffering. Oh, some great books on that. One called by Arthur McGill. I don't know if you ever read that.
I've heard McGill.
Yeah. On suffering.
Yep.
Yeah. And pardon?
It was a long time ago. I think you gave me that.
We gave Dan Prue, J. Winters. He understands that suffering. And that's part of the theology of the glory too. Is like avoid it. Terrible. It's got to just get over it. Fix it. And suffering is God's way. That he often. Because the word suffer, passion, the whole thing is passive, it puts me, the old nature, I want to be in control and do it myself, or at least help, or at least figure it out, or bargain with God in this way, or bully God in this way, or, defend passively, it removes me from the equation.
Yeah. I think that's what Paul, when he says, I came to you knowing nothing but Jesus Christ crucified, is we take that and that's he said this is a part of the Corinthian correspondence, which is huge with theology of the cross, is we take that as an atonement theory, like he knows something about what happened to Jesus and what was going on behind the scenes of the cross, when really he's saying, this is my life. I am the vehicle in many ways as an apostle. I am a vehicle of getting this, not just telling you about something, but showing you something and actually doing something with you, that you receive me in all of my weakness. It's like receiving Jesus himself in his brokenness.
Right. So it's the medium, the and the message
are the same for Paul.
Gospel and the gospel and the person giving it. So when we preach on Sundays, and both of us do, right? We're a bunch of broken people in front.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And we're not, I've got my act together. You want to be like me. I think there's a lot of theologians of glory right now that almost get up there on stage and in these churches. And size is not that, big of a deal, but it's almost like people come to quote success, and what they're doing is they're basically envious, and they're going, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
I don't think too many people looked at Paul and said, oh, I want to be like him.
No, you should look at Paul and say, I don't want to be like you. But
I don't, and I think that getting way back, like to my interviews with Dean Hopman.
Yeah.
And he's saying, hey, it looks like you could handle a challenge. And I'm thinking, I don't want to suffer like Paul.
No, that's right. Yeah. And Paul,
I don't want to do that.
And Paul doesn't want you to.
Right. But you know what?
When you do suffer, he wants to be in communion with you. And then in that communion, you're in communion with Jesus.
But my first call, it was a stripping away a lot of self. You can use a lot of other words for that. I grew up in one of the largest churches in our denomination.
Oh, did you really?
4,000 members. Yeah. St. Lawrence and Frankenmuth.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. Wow, you come from a mega church. All right.
Yeah. And I was used to that. I was also used to, hey, small church is 500 members.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, so I was used to, and I had been in, we had been in a Christian band, and I've sung in groups and done some dramas. And I don't think I preached. I probably gave testimony we had contemporary worship since I was in third grade once in a while there.
Okay.
And there were hundreds and hundreds of people I was used to. And so my mentality was like, okay, I'm going to get out there, and I've got all these great words, and I'm, I've got this knowledge, and then I get to Chapel of the Cross, and it was a cross because I was the first member.
And yeah, that's right. Yeah, because you had that.
It was empty, and it's like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. What happens when there's no one here to watch me?
Big deal. Yeah. I think there was one. I think there was the smallest service I had one time was for Maundy Thursday there, and there were the organist, myself, and 3 people.
Yep. And Jesus is like, hey. Jesus is like, hey, I'm there too.
Gathered. I don't care. Yeah.
He's like, this is great.
So the theologian of the cross, we talked about this a little. So the theologian of the cross, not a theology of the cross, though I think there is, you can learn a lot and kind of look through this lens to see the world. You get to see your own brokenness. You get to see the beauty of the brokenness that God uses you in the midst of that. You get to see a God who is of all compassion and grace, and that is the heart of who he is. And so his kingdom is set up on the basis of that kind of love and mercy and grace and forgiveness, or the gospel. The kingdom only advances through the gospel. It does not advance through the law. And so this class that I'm teaching, and we could probably need another podcast on that. The problem I've had with the interaction of a lot of Christians in the United States to the politics in the United States is we're playing with power.
Yes,
and we're playing with coercion.
Yep.
And we think somehow by using power games, we're going to advance God's kingdom.
Well, the unfortunate thing is this. Here's one of our problems, and this is one of our theology of glory approaches, is that we like to boast how much the gospel has spread throughout the history of Christianity.
Right.
And unfortunately, one of the mechanisms for spread is that what happened was that the church, which was expanding very, very well on its own, in and of itself, by the power of the Holy Spirit from the very beginning. I mean, 3,000 souls in one day,
got enmeshed.
It decided to cling to a larger power structure that was expanding, well, kind of doing its own,
to legitimate it,
and expanding in its own way.
Right.
And by clinging on to that and going, expanding in the way that, well, empires expand, then the church expanded too all around the world through imperialism and all kinds of stuff. And so you kind of have to look at it and say, well,
but was it the church? That's part of what you have to ask. The theology of the cross.
Yeah, you can say, all right, so we can boast about how many Christians there are around the world, but then you say, well, what are we really talking about here? I had a conversation yesterday with one of our pastors here in Hickory, and
Hickory.
Hickory. That's right, Hickory, North Carolina, which I believe it started as a
mission. Was it not? Or was it?
I want to say people can correct me this later when they hear this, but when I looked it up, I believe it started as like an ale house that was started under a hickory tree. It's a little different. Never got a mission. That's right.
My hometown started as a mission to the Ojibwe Chippewa Indians.
Okay, so this is so Richard is Mohawk, and so we talked about Christianity on the reservation a little bit. And he was saying that there's pushback in younger generations because it sounds like they see this as kind of a remnant of colonialism, right? And so they recognize this and they want to go back to their ancient, with the religion of their ancestors.
Right. I get, but yeah.
So, but that's kind of the conundrum, right? I mean,
there is a conflate. So what's happened is the Christian church as a movement, let's say, not as buildings or institutions,
right,
got conflated with the power structures of any society.
Yeah,
and and that's what this class is going to be looking at, is what way are these two things to interplay? And I think there is interplay, but it's like what's been happening, actually, in my opinion. And I know there are people who probably are not happy with my opinion.
Yeah, that's fine.
But that the last few years, the way that Christianity has gotten political and gotten involved in all sorts of stuff, first of all, gets us off our game, which is the gospel. Yeah. And secondly, actually is detrimental to the Christian church's mission in the end. We are losing, and this is what I'm seeing in students at the university here as well, is a whole generation that looks at Christianity now and is so jaded because they see it in a kind of a postmodern, it's just about power. It's just about privilege. It's just about trying to stay in charge. And I have to admit, a lot of why we jumped in to be with the Roman Empire and then all the others is because we don't want to suffer. Yeah, we don't want to go through alienation. We want to be treated well, and we want to have our religion, our faith endorsed by power.
By the Prince of Northern Italy, aka the papacy, right?
Right. So
Luther's just big thing.
Right. And Luther, it's fascinating. There's this little tract that I got to see about comparing Jesus and the Pope in
the woodcuts.
Yeah.
If you did that.
And it just shows the difference between Jesus, who is crowned with thrones, the Pope, who's got this, crowns of jewels, Jesus carrying his cross, the Pope being carried by others. Yeah. And it's like
the war horse and the donkey and
all of this stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, who are we following? And so Graham Tomlin wrote a book called The Power of the Cross, and he uses Luther's theology. I think he does. Who wrote Penensis? Why am I forgetting? It's Pascal.
Oh,
and I think Thomas or Saint Francis.
Okay,
is an example. But at least he does with Luther, and he goes like, Luther was not saying that, there's just some abuses within Christianity in this day. He's saying, wait a minute, they're worshiping a different God.
Yeah.
They're worshiping a God of power. Yeah. We're worshiping a God of compassion. They're worshiping a God of of glory, we're worshiping a God of the cross.
Yeah.
And so at the heart of the gospel is a crucified Messiah. And I think today, from our puritanical type roots in America to this day, we've been following more or less in America a bit of a covenant theology of, if we do this, then God will bless us. And God is like this with the United States and so any use of our power is right, all this stuff, which is actually very broken at times. So,
we want
that theology of the cross has
now.
not been lived out easily or well here.
I think one of the problems is that we want the theology of glory now. We want, whereas the theology of the cross shows us that God has come and we have killed him, and he let us kill him.
Yep.
Because he loves us, and we are that dangerous to ourselves and to his creation. And so whereas being a theologian of the cross forces you to come to terms with that. Whereas the theology of glory does the opposite. The theology of glory makes you, or a theologian of glory looks at the world around you and says, hey, there really aren't problems here. There might be some problems. There are some problems, but overall we've got a good thing going. And so if anyone can make it in this good world, then that means that that's a good thing and God must be behind them.
Right.
Whereas so if you are doing really well,
then God must have blessed you with that.
That's right. If you're doing really well in this world, that means that God's behind it. And that's that. So if you see it upside
if you're
down,
not,
then God's not.
Then God's not behind you, and you must have done something bad.
That's right. And that was, who was it? Max Weber with the
Protestant work ethic? No.
Yeah. No, that's right. The Protestant work ethic. That's where that comes from, is this idea that, it's kind of in Calvinism, that
right.
That if you are predestined one way and you don't really know which way you're predestined, and so if you are doing well according to this world, the mindset behind that is, why would God waste blessings in this world on people he's predestined to hell? That's the mindset.
Right. Well, then read the Bible. Okay.
Right.
Psalm 73 specifically, I think this Psalm of Asaph is one of my favorites. And he says, I almost slipped because the wealthy kind of hang pride around them like a necklace, and they have an easy life, until I went into the sanctuary of God. And then that's where I realized that he set him on a slippery slope.
Yeah. And so, but that's a part of American culture, is that if I am doing well, it's a
moral blessing from
me.
God. I must be moral.
Yes.
If I get good grades, I must be good.
Right, because God would not waste his earthly blessings on someone who is predestined to go to hell. Right.
So maybe I'm overstating their case, or Calvin's case, but I think at the heart of Calvinism, in the end, the number one factor of God, if you had to say what's the number one, who is God at his heart? God is sovereignty. God is absolute. If you'd ask Luther, who is God at his heart? He would say God is grace or love or compassion, or he had a German term, Mitleid, which is a God who comes alongside of us. And that is the God of the scriptures, the God who came alongside of an Abraham, who really was an idolater at the time, who came alongside of Jacob, even though he was a schnook, and cared for him, who came alongside of Israel and suffered with them for 40 years throughout the wilderness, bearing with them into the promised land, working with them, sending them prophet after prophet, doing all of these things. And you see God's glory showing up all the time, but not in a way of power, might, but often you don't want the God of power and might to come out hard on you.
But isn't this? I think you're right about that. But to be fair for Calvinism,
please,
is that they're not wrong, because God is sovereign.
But
God
that's
is
not
holy.
who he. Yeah.
It's not how he
operates, or it's not what he cares. It's like saying Bill Gates is rich. So what?
How about this? In the current circumstances, that's not
the number one.
That is not our ultimate relationship to him.
Right. And that's why I go back to the cross. You can strip everything off of Jesus, even his life. He's not powerful. He's not mighty. He's not, he's not beautiful. But the one thing that he still is on the cross as he's dying for us is love. That is how he has chosen to relate to us.
I love John 13, where they're at the Last Supper, and John writes that Jesus would love them to the end.
That's why he got down on his hands and knees and washed their feet.
But no. But that's not even the end. I mean, he's doing that. But at the end, see, it's this, the word is telos in John 13.
Right.
And then Jesus gets up there, and the last thing he does in the Gospel of John is he creates relationship where there wasn't between Mary and John, or the unnamed apostle. And then at the very end, and then John says, and it is finished. He says tetelestai, and Jesus himself says tetelestai, it is finished. And it's that same word telos. The end has now come. Cool. And we always take this as like a vicarious, like an atonement. Again, we take it, we turn into an atonement theory thing, when it's really like, no. John just said that he was going to love them to the end. And then at the end of and that's the beginning of the Last Supper. And at the end of that event, which is the crucifixion, Jesus says, it's ended. And it's like, he did.
I have loved
to the very end. And that's the last thing he does in the Gospel of John before he dies. And it's just like, but we miss that, because I think that what happens is we get so wrapped up in ways to avoid the theology of the cross.
Yep.
And we do that. And sometimes we do that through systematic theology. And I love systematic theology.
Right.
But we find ways around it. Kierkegaard had a statement about that once, right? He said something like, we know what it says, but we find ways to get around it because we're so creative.
Well, and I think even theologians in general, I know this sounds maybe a little caustic, but I've talked to a number of seminarians. I had vicars and stuff. And they started, when I was at seminary in the 80s, they didn't really talk about the theology of the cross. We just talked law and gospel, which is sort of the same, but we didn't. Now they're talking about the theology of the cross. But I noticed they were talking about the theology of the cross and the theology of glory way. They were using it as a way to show how great we are compared to everybody else. And it's like, that's not what it does.
The student, you're talking the students are doing that.
Yeah, and I think it came, and it's like, that's not how it really works.
That's not how it's taught at the seminary, though. That's not how
I don't know. That's how they were expressing it to me was not the way it should have. It became a tool to analyze and dissect everyone else. And it's really not. It's really a tool to analyze and dissect us all.
Well, we should contact the systematics department. No, one of the introductory book is Gerhard Ferde's On Being a Theologian of the Cross.
Yeah.
I remember because I had Bob Kolb and Leo Sanchez teach that. And that was not the way that it was. No,
they get it. I just think it's really hard for any of us to hear it. And so I just took it and thought, we're going to have to work on this, because this is not the way that you should be. We're still playing these games of better than, and that's not.
Yeah, that's not supposed to be our interaction with the world. That's the world's interaction with itself. But our interaction with the world is, we are coming here to acknowledge reality for what it really is, and care about people.
So we probably, Alec, I don't know, we've kind of jumped around here. I don't know if this is, and there's so many different loose strings we probably need to pull on or pull together at some point. I don't know if we can do it in this podcast.
We can't. No, we're, we've been going for a good amount of time.
So I'm just wondering, we might want to write down some things that we want to talk about. So we didn't get into how destructive a theology of glory can actually be when it's utilized by both a church and by a country. Power games.
Well, it's a natural state for a for the power plays of the world. So that's the natural way of operating for the world.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't probably dealt with what it really, and I could look more and think about it beforehand, so I'm just not shooting off my mouth.
Wait, you don't do that? You don't like doing that?
Well, I don't mind, but I also like to be at least somewhat thoughtful. But look at being a theologian of the cross compared to just a theology about the cross.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of atonement theories become formulas. Yep. And I'm not saying they're totally wrong or anything. No, but the point is not just, okay, Jesus plus, blank equals,
Right. Know this and you're good to go.
Yeah, I think it becomes head knowledge often then. And then theology, I always like to joke, who's the first theologian in the Bible who talks about God? And that's the serpent.
Yeah. Yeah.
He talks about him in the third person.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
What did God really say? Right. And so once you start stepping out and kind of doing that instead of dialoguing with God, you got a problem. Yeah. And so theology can often avoid it. So we're cross avoiders.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what I saw at, so when I did my thesis, these churches going through a difficult, trying to transform them to be more outreaching and all this stuff, that the pastor, all of us, it's hard to embrace the theology of the cross. All of us need to go through death resurrection on a daily basis. We say that, right? And I die to myself and I risk, and sometimes for the sake of the church, for the sake of its growth, I have to risk my reputation. I have to risk my position, my career, to speak and to serve in such a way that is consistent with following Jesus and his message. And I saw a few pastors were willing to do that, and their churches were transformed. And the church, but the churches where pastors like, yeah, that's not, I'm my career, my family, my this, my that. Other things tended to limit then the change and the growth in the kingdom of God there. And so we're all cross avoiders, and I get it. I want a comfortable life. I don't have a comfortable life right now, starting a church from scratch, even now, 7 years into it, being down here.
Well, you think about the fact that you did the same thing in Louisiana, and now you're, pretty similar.
I know. And I said I never wanted to go through that again.
Yeah, that was your big challenge.
But I thought this time it would be a lot easier, and it hasn't been. And the people have been wonderful. We've got some great members and stuff, but it's like, there's still been death resurrections all the time. And I have to look at myself and say, you know what? Yeah, it doesn't have to work out the way I'm thinking. My expectations are not in line with God's kingdom. So again and again, it's the death resurrection of the repentance and renewal. Yep. Luther would say that every day is a day of repentance. It's not something you do over here with this little piece of paper and you do, and so, every day is remembering your baptism, the fact that you've been incorporated into the life of Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection.
Yeah, baptism.
And what that means. To live as Christ, to die as gain. I have been crucified with Christ. All these passages of theology, the cross passage.
I know. It's all over the place. It's all over the New Testament.
And so Luther said it was kind of a lens through which he could look at the world, look at a situation. You can see the brokenness and you can see the beauty of God's grace. You could look at me and say, like Paul says, I'm a broken or a clay pot, but the glory of God is inside. You can look at circumstances, and it's not that you find the silver lining in every gray cloud. Right. That's not what it's about.
That's theology of glory.
That's theology of glory again. It's where you see God is at work, putting to death and raising to life.
Yep, that's right. And even I like to say that, when the gospel is not shared, when you have one strong person, we were talking about this before, people are attracted to strength. One strong person sharing the gospel with another strong person. It's like, I've got all my stuff together. And now if you get all your stuff together too, then we can both be Christians together. It's the opposite. Right. It's one very weak, down and out person and another very weak, down and out person. One of them is relying on Jesus. And you see that, and it's like, oh, that means in my weakness and my suffering and my pain and my brokenness, I can cling to Jesus too, because he knows that. He's lived that, he's experienced that, and he's come out the other side and brings us through it.
So I'm going to visit, I think, one of our members who's in the hospital right now for the last almost 15 days. And she's gone through some really tough 6-7 months time. And God is with her through all of this. She's weak. She's wondering what's next. There's a lot of uncertainty. She doesn't see things working out well. Her whole family is, praying through all of this and stuff. We're with them through this. Yep. That's in the end, it's kind of like what I think the emphasis when Jesus was hanging on the cross talking to the one thief, when he says, truly today you will be with me in paradise. It's the with me part that was more important.
Yeah.
God is with her. He has not forsaken her. She doesn't have to what did I do wrong? None of that stuff. No, God is with her, and he is working his will in her life, even in the midst of weakness.
Well, and that's the cry of dereliction too, is that, right. There's two major events in the Gospels that we see God speaking from the skies saying, this is my beloved son, with him I'm well pleased. This is my beloved son, listen to him. And when Jesus so the baptism, the transfiguration, when Jesus cries out, he gets nothing.
And he doesn't say, my Father, he says, my God.
My God.
Which to me says that father-son relationship was severed.
Yeah, we could talk about that more. I might disagree with you on that, but
I think that's something was going on there at a deep level that he didn't call him Father.
Yeah. But that's a discussion we should have later. We should have that discussion later.
Yeah.
Let's so we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We'll come back together and do that pretty soon.
Yeah, look over all this stuff and determine which rabbit hole you want to go down with me.
Yeah, that's right. For everyone listening, we're going to do this again. John, thank you so much. It's always a joy to talk to you. And we'll see you guys.
I love the fact that you're somebody that can challenge me, and I like that because I don't have my act together yet on all this stuff.
What is that? You've been doing this since before I was born. What does that say?
I know that's scary, because I think that's the thing. I look at people like you and other pastors that are so much younger than me, and it seems like, oh my gosh, I'm such a putz. I'm 33 years into this, and I still. And I look at you guys and it's like, wow, it's connecting.
You say the same thing.
Praise God, praise God that's the case, because we need more than ever, probably pastors, theologians, people who are speaking prophetically, apostolically, theologically, the cross, gospel-centered wise, in this world more than ever, because it's just it's very confusing, and there's a lot of not Christianity going on in Christianity.
Yeah, well, that's
a lot of other subtexts that are taking over the message.
Well, that's another plug. If you're interested in speaking the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ in the in pastoral ministry, there's a lot of congregations that are needing it. So, all right. We'll end here. Thank you. And we'll talk again soon.
You got it. Bye-bye.
Bye.